On November 29, 2004, 24-year-old armored car guard Robert Keith Palomares was just doing his job, collecting weekend deposits from an AMC theater in Phoenix, Arizona. Before he could store the cash in the truck and continue his morning route, a hooded man opened fire. 5 of the rounds struck Palomares in the head, and he dropped to the ground. The shooter rushed in and snatched the cash bag containing over $56,000. As the suspect made his getaway on a bicycle, authorities quickly converged on the scene. Fingerprint evidence would later reveal that they were not searching for a career criminal or hardened gang member. They were looking for a well-educated businessman and former Mormon missionary. His name was Jason Derrick Brown, and after that fateful morning in 2004, he became one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives. For more than 20 years, Brown has managed to evade capture. On this episode, we will dive into the story of Jason Derrick Brown, why he did what he did, and what may have happened to him after. Jason Derrick Brown once projected to the world the image of a successful and determined businessman, one who was charming, educated, and well-traveled. But beneath that facade was a man drowning in debt, desperate to keep up appearances at any cost. In 2004, likely driven by this desperation, Brown ambushed an armored car guard, fatally shooting him and making off with more than $56,000 in cash. Afterwards, Brown all but vanished. Despite being placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, and despite the multitude of tips called in over the years, Jason Derrick Brown has managed to evade justice to this day. Some think he may be long gone, while others believe he's still here, alive and well and living under an assumed identity. Either way, his story has become both a chilling tale of what desperate times can do to an individual, and a haunting reminder of just how easily someone can vanish. Jason Derrick Brown was born July 1, 1969 in Los Angeles, California. He grew up in Laguna Beach with his parents and his 3 siblings. The Brown family was heavily involved in the Mormon Church, but despite their religious ties, the family harbored dark secrets in the form of their father, David John Brown Sr. He was described as a con man with a violent streak and multiple vices. David loved to gamble, and as a result, he was always pursuing more money to support his addiction. Rather than earning the money through legitimate means, David stole and scammed and sometimes employed the help of his children in his schemes. After the parents divorced, Jason and his siblings became a commodity. His father used money to lure Jason into spending more time with him, drawn by the stacks of cash he was welcomed to freely. Despite such a negative influence, Jason managed to stay out of trouble in his youth. In 1988, Jason was called to Paris, France to serve as a Mormon missionary. He spent 2 years there, during which time he met his future wife. Jason earned his MBA in international business and became fluent in French. Unfortunately, his marriage would only last 4 years, ending in divorce in 1995. That same year, his father abandoned the family and vanished, presumably to outrun his lifestyle and his debts. 2 major losses in 1 year weighed heavily on Jason, who quickly began to spiral. Rather than mourning the unexpected absence of his father, Brown elected to keep his father's memory alive by mirroring his lifestyle. Friends and family later spoke of Brown's reckless spending, gambling addiction, and substance abuse. He was always spending lavish sums on luxury cars, flashy toys, and debaucherous nights out. To Brown, appearances were everything. He wanted to be known as wealthy, successful, and adventurous. Unfortunately, his lifestyle far outpaced his income. Brown started multiple businesses, which he ran out of his home in Salt Lake City, Utah. In addition to a golf import and export company, Brown ran on-the-doorstep advertising and Toys Unlimited, but all of them combined did not generate enough revenue to sustain his lifestyle. By 2004, Brown was all but broke. He had already defaulted on a major loan and maxed out his credit cards, and he was now drowning in debt. Those closest to him could tell that the mask was slipping, despite Brown's desperation to keep presenting himself as rich and successful. This desperation, in his case, would soon turn deadly. On the morning of November 29, 2004, armored car guard Robert Keith Palomares began his pickup route. His job was to drive to various businesses around Phoenix and pick up their cash deposits. One of his morning stops was at the AMC Theater off East Ray Road. Palomares entered the theater, collected the deposits, and carried the cash bag back toward the truck. But before he could store the cash and head off to his next stop, a hooded man appeared and opened fire with a .45 caliber Glock. Before anyone could react, 6 gunshots rang out in the street. One struck the window of the theater's ticket booth, shattering the glass. The other 5 struck Palomares in the head. As Palomares collapsed to the ground, the shooter grabbed the bag containing more than $56,000 in cash and fled on foot down a nearby alley. He hopped on a bicycle and made his escape, and shortly after, first responders arrived on scene. There was nothing they could do to save Palomares, but police were able to track down multiple eyewitnesses at the scene. The witnesses described the assailant as a young Hispanic man, which would later serve as another example of why eyewitness testimony is not always credible. Investigators soon recovered the killer's abandoned bicycle, and on it, they found multiple fingerprints. When police ran the prints through the system, it returned a match. None other than Jason Derek Brown. His prints had been entered into the system only weeks prior, registered during a gun sale in Utah. The store records associated with the fingerprints showed that Brown had purchased a .45 caliber Glock, the exact same gun that had been used in the murder of Palomares. Police had found fingerprints, and in doing so, they'd found a literal smoking gun, and it was pointed straight at Brown. Within days, an arrest warrant was issued for Jason Derek Brown. His photos were circulated by the media, and tips began pouring in. Brown had long since left town, helped in part by his own brother, David Jr., who was later indicted and convicted for aiding a fugitive. Brown had fled Phoenix and driven to Las Vegas, where he swapped cars. After that, he made his way to California, briefly staying with his sister there. Police had tracked Brown and were on their way to his sister's home to make the arrest. Within an hour or less of police arriving, Brown fled once again. Thanks to the news coverage of the story, Brown had been tipped off and he knew authorities were closing in. Eventually, in January of 2005, police found Brown's Cadillac Escalade in the long-term parking of the Portland International Airport. By this point, Brown was completely in the wind. Hundreds of tips came in, some as far away as Europe, but every lead quickly turned cold. In December of 2007, Brown was officially added to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list, with a $200,000 reward advertised for information leading to his arrest. Over the course of the next 15 years, Brown's face was circulated nationwide, including, more recently, age-progressed photos. Finally, in 2022, after nearly 2 decades of dead ends, Brown was removed from the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. He remains wanted to this day, and authorities urge the public to take caution and assume Brown to be armed and dangerous. This leaves one major question. Where did Jason Derek Brown go? There are plenty of theories as to where Jason Derek Brown may be today. Many believe that he is alive and living under an assumed identity. Brown was fluent in French, experienced in international travel, and known to use aliases in the past. He could have easily fled the country and began a new life in Europe under a new name. A strange fact about the case that is often brought up in discussions of theories is the possibility of Brown working with an accomplice. His brother was convicted of assisting him, but many believe that Brown had more help than only his brother. On the day of the murder, Brown was seen on security footage hours later at a fitness facility in Tempe, Arizona. Brown entered the building carrying a duffel bag. A few minutes later, Brown is seen leaving the building, but without the duffel bag he came in with. What was in the bag, and where did it go? Does this confirm that Brown had another accomplice, potentially one who helped him disappear? Without further details, it's impossible to be certain. Some believe that Brown is still alive, but they do not think he fled the country at all. In fact, there are many who think that rather than running, Brown went back to his roots. A very popular theory posits that Brown is hiding among isolated Mormon communities in Utah. This theory is bolstered by a 2008 sighting in which a man reported seeing Brown at a stoplight in Salt Lake City. According to the witness, he looked over at the light and made eye contact with Brown. Upon their mutual recognition, Brown sped off, running the red light and vanishing from view. This sighting is regarded as credible by the FBI, both due to known patterns of fugitives returning to familiar places and the identity of the witness. This was not someone who had merely seen Brown's face on the news, but a former mission partner who had spent 2 years living and working with Brown in Paris. Of course, some believe Brown may already be dead, but with no evidence to support this theory and no body recovered anywhere, many investigators believe he's still out there and on the run. Jason Derek Brown's story is one of contradiction. A man who once preached faith and believed in education and hard work, who later gunned down an innocent 24-year-old in cold blood. Someone who projected an image of wealth and success, who was actually living far beyond his means and drowning in debt. Ironically, the cash that Brown was so desperate for couldn't save him. He had to disappear, and in doing so, abandon the lifestyle he was willing to kill to protect. 2 decades later, we still don't know where Jason Derek Brown is, or if he's alive at all. What we do know is that Robert Keith Palomares lost his life for merely doing his job, leaving his family with a grief that will never vanish, unlike his killer. Until Brown is one day found, or until the truth finally comes to light, this case will remain as one of America's most infamous fugitive stories. Jason Derek Brown will continue to be a ghost in the wind, and his story shall remain as yet another tale from the underworld.
If you enjoyed this true crime story, don't forget to like and subscribe and let us know what you think in the comments. Want to watch another chilling tale from the underworld? Check out these other videos on screen.